Hello everyone, it's Oliver Harper here, and today Tim Partridge is joining me to discuss Mortal Kombat. Now, you may remember Tim from the Darkman and Ghostbusters commentaries from a while back. Duncan and Richard aren't fans of Mortal Kombat, but Tim and I are. So, remember folks, it's an audio commentary, not a video, but if you wish to sync it with your own copy of the film, put the timestamp to 0 and press play now. Now, I saw this film back in 1995. I was underage, 13 years old. I had to sneak my way in, thanks to a bunch of lads who sold me a ticket. Because I knew I'd get turned away at the box office, and I had a bit of trouble with the usher, because he wouldn't believe me. But, you know, I managed to get my way in after a bit of hassle, but I was blown away, because I saw Street Fighter the movie the year before, and that was a major disappointment for many of us, I think. Now I know I see Street Fighter as a bit of a guilty pleasure. It's kind of so bad, it's good. But this was, a competent movie. It was better than Mario Brothers. So, it's maybe one of the kind of the best video game adaptations we've got. And we've had so many, and this is like the third go at doing it. And it seems to kind of stood the test of time in terms of its kind of its storytelling. I mean, there's a little bit ropey here and there, and the effects are a bit rubbish. But I mean, Tim, you saw this back in '95, didn't you?
Hold on a second, Oliver. Was this not a 12 when it came out in Britain?
Yeah, it's 15. BBFC.
Are you sure?
Yeah. And it wasn't even lowered for VHS.
I went with quite a relatively young teenage crowd to the cinema to see this.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was BBFC certificate 12.
Yeah. Well, maybe, depending on different counties, they had different ratings, maybe. Because I remember as a kid, I always adamantly said Batman was a 15 in Cambridge. And also Batman Returns. But apparently that was the first 12s. Batman was the first 12. And Batman Returns was a 12, apparently. But I remember I've always said to myself it was a 15. Because I wanted to go see it. I just couldn't
Wasn't
get
there
in.
that whole thing, though, where they would release them at the cinema as 12, and then it would come out on video as a 15, like Gremlins 2?
Yeah, also Starship Troopers was a 15. Then I got put on video as an 18. That was a big blunder by the BBFC. Because I saw Starship Troopers, and I was like, this is so gory for a 15. I couldn't believe it. It should be an 18, even though I was lucky to be seeing it, But yeah, I swear, it was a 15 when it came out.
I was going to say as well, Street Fighter came out...
Well, the video game, or the movie?
The movie came out earlier in the year of 1995.
No, it was...
in England?
In England, yeah, 94. It was 94 for... Actually, I think it was maybe Christmas Day, 94, for America.
Yeah, but over here it was 95. We also got Mortal Kombat much later than it came out in the States.
Yeah.
I think it came out in summer.
In the States, yes. It was summer.
Yeah.
It was summer release. It did get pushed back a few times.
For us, it came out, I think, November.
Yeah. I remember it being a bit cold at the time. Going to town to watch it.
I must say I quite like this film, and I'll give you a reason. I'll tell you exactly my reasoning why too. From a perspective of someone who was the perfect age to see the film at the time. Basically, the beat-em-up game for our generation in the early 90s, it was kind of a rite of passage, I guess, I mean, you were so, at that age, adolescence and testosterone going around and, playground fights and all the rest of it. You would engage very much with video games and video game violence. And I think with Mortal Kombat as well, it's an incredibly violent game, but even before that, Street Fighter, which we mentioned had become a movie.
Yeah.
Street Fighter, when that came out in whenever it was, early 92, well, around 1992.
91, 92, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was a huge thing for all of us. But I remember that, always thinking about a film. Everyone was talking about, what if they made a film, And you heard Jean-Claude Van Damme's name attached to it, considerably by fans and also in the press. And at that point too, it was kind of at that time in film when in action films where you had it was kind of a post-canon situation, wasn't it? It was a sort of direct-to-video and also films that had been at the cinema, but we, being young, we associated with them being kind of direct-to-video movies, and you saw films that were released by entertainment film distributors. And
you get MGM getting involved, or like even New Line and things like that, and Warner Brothers.
But you had these names like Van Damme, and you had Steven Seagal, Wesley Snipes. I remember at school, so many people loved the film AWOL, Lionheart.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a film that everyone knew about. Nowhere to Run, you know, these kind of films, and that seemed a natural fit for Street Fighter when it came out. And
even though Jean-Claude's Belgium, he's not even American, you know.
But he was a big action star. And then we heard, you know, about Raul Julia, who everybody loved, you know, as Bison, great casting. I remember seeing in a magazine a picture of Kylie Minogue's Cammy.
Mm.
And I was just thinking, wow, that's amazing. And it got around the classroom pretty quickly, you know, because firstly, that was a character that represented the UK in this game. And it was also somebody we knew. It was like, wow, another celebrity who we've heard of. Wow, you know, they're really going for it. You know, this seemed like the big thing, you know. And with the anticipation for this film was absolutely massive. It was huge. And I remember when the film played, I remember the opening day, everyone from my year at school came to watch that film.
Wow.
And I love Stephen E. D'Souza. I think he's brilliant. I love Commando, and I love Die Hard. You know, and he's given so much to the action genre. He's changed some of the rules. He's brilliant, absolutely amazing writer. However, I'll never forget the feeling of looking around that cinema, especially I think it was near the end sequence. There's a bit where Raul Julia is hoisted on wires with light-up shoes. You know, just statically hung in the middle of a ceiling. And I just looked around at the whole room, and you could hear a pin drop. I mean, it was so depressing, and because it wasn't what we wanted. You know, it was I realised too that there was various politics within the making of the film, and that they wanted to have. Capcom wanted it to be going more of a sort of a James Bond route with Bison having a secret lair and all this kind of thing. But, you know, we'd grown up, you know, we'd had watched these characters tournament fight. Yeah. You know, it was about, you know, it was the simplicity. It was the pure adolescent simplicity of, you know, for better or for worse, of two people going up against each other and there being a winner.
Yeah.
And you just anticipate to see who's going to win.
Sure.
You know, and this avoided that. It created this whole thing with, I will, again, Stephen D'Souza's an amazing writer. You know, there's commentary on, slight commentary here and there on global politics and stuff of the time. But it was lost. You know, I know any of that would be lost. And also, in spite of all that brilliance, there was this overriding kind of camp, cartoony, self-parody tone.
You're saying it's more of a spoof. Wasn't it really on the game?
And a send-up of, I mean, there are points where it almost feels like a Flint movie or something. You know, it's like a parody of a James Bond film. And also the scale of it too just didn't seem to be met by the budget. And it was...
We had a higher budget than Mortal Kombat.
All we wanted to see was an alleyway with two people having a fight.
And seeing special moves, seeing fireballs and,
everything
hurricane kicks.
It was a big thing. This was something we took so seriously. As you do at that age, it's something that burns into pop culture. And it just kind of felt that it wasn't seen as important to the filmmakers as it was to us. And I thought that was that just felt like a giant letdown.
But when you saw Mortal Kombat, though, was that the defining moment for you to say, this is delivered on what I wanted?
When Mortal Kombat began, just from the opening of having that title sequence, I even say before that, the New Line logo, when it comes up and you hear the techno soundtrack going, and then you see that amazing CGI logo that was created by Metrolight, who did the title sequence for the Batman, the Joel Schumacher Batman film as well.
Oh, excellent.
When that appears and you just see that it's dark, I mean, there are fundamental problems that have been addressed many times before in the fact that Mortal Kombat, the game, was very much, it was a big splatter event, and it kind of took a lot of elements from the kind of video nasty movie genre,
sure,
that and had taken it into a game realm, But it was all the kind of the violence that you kind of associated more with something like a Peter Jackson Brain Dead or Army of Darkness, these kind of things. Even RoboCop to some degree, all that you saw like a bucket load of blood just flying out of somebody as they're being dismembered, and that's kind of what it was about. And obviously with this film they couldn't do that because it had to be a PG-13.
Yeah, because they'd done their marketing research, hadn't they?
Yeah.
That their key audience were teenagers.
So they can't cut themselves out of that. However, saying that, it was really, there were two factors. Firstly, it was a tournament film. It was a film that's built around tournament, and for that we were forever grateful, because that's not what we got with Street Fighter. And the other thing is the tone of it. It felt like this was an adult film.
Yeah.
Kids don't, we could say kids. We were early, we were young teenagers.
Yeah.
But we don't, we don't want to be patronised. We want to be watching the films that adults are watching.
Yeah. To me, when I saw it, it felt like that.
When I watched Street Fighter, it felt like a film that had been made by old men saying, "This is what kids, would want," and that's entirely from my early teenage perspective.
Yeah.
Having been someone who was a fan of the material, and with Mortal Kombat, it was on another level, and it felt invigorated. It felt young. It had energy to it. It felt like right now. It really felt like right now. And I made you watch a bit of Shopping earlier. Paul W.S. Anderson's first film, which was done for Film 4, and with his producing partner Jeremy Bolt, who he went on to produce all of his future films.
Basically all his movies, yeah.
But even with that, I mean, at that time, Paul Anderson has said this in interviews, but it was a very different, place back then for British cinema.
Yeah.
And there really wasn't anything that was aspiring to be kind of big Hollywood. Although I say that, actually, one thing we didn't mention before we recorded this commentary was that there are three directors in the sort of 1993 to 1995 area who have since gone on to kind of be sort of the faces of cinema and TV. And one of them is Danny Cannon, who'd done The Young Americans in 1993. And by 1995, he was directing Judge Dredd. And he then went on to be the pilot director and executive producer of CSI, and Gotham, and all these big, huge shows. So he's one of the guys. There's Paul Anderson, who obviously done Shopping, and the other one, I guess, is Edgar Wright, who'd done The Fistful of.
Do you think would you put Danny Boyle in that lump of those early British directors who kind of kicking off, because they've all gone on to do bigger things in different areas? But
I'm talking principally about the genre filmmakers, the big ones now. I mean,
sure,
things have moved on so far. At the time, though, when Mortal Kombat came out, there was a magazine that used to be in cinemas, in English cinemas, called Flicks magazine. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I remember in Flicks magazine, what they'd do is it was a magazine that you got free at the cinema.
They still do those magazines, but they're kind of like Cineworld's own brand of magazine. Right. You get and you look at what's coming out.
They were there to promote the films that were out or were coming out. And on the back 2 pages, they would list all of the films with a synopsis. And underneath it would say who the director was, and it would put in brackets what they'd done. And when Street Fighter came out and it said Stephen E. D'Souza, in brackets, it had Die Hard and his credentials. For Paul Anderson, you're selling this to a mainstream audience, so I don't think it had Shopping in, but it had El Cid down, the TV show, the English TV show,
really?
Which he was a writer on. And I remember as a kid just thinking, El Cid, like, really? The
got him to do Mortal Kombat?
The English TV show that I can go home and watch, right? Because this was a different world back then, And Shopping is visually dynamic. It's very, very, very visually flashy. It's very visceral. It's got Jude Law in it. I think it was the first film that Jude Law had starred in.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be Ewan McGregor, but I think Jude Law beat him to it in the auditions.
And he looks so young in the film. But it also has some big name actors in it too, like Sean Bean and Jonathan Pryce.
Yeah.
and of course Sadie Frost as well, who
married Jude Law.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's really a really energetic film, and I guess one of the other things with Mortal Kombat as well is it even though it was made by New Line, who was still, this is before Lord of the Rings, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So this was.
They're still kind of dabbling in trying to appeal to the younger teenagers, because they obviously helped finance Ninja Turtles. So this was probably the next stage on for them, and appealing to the teenage market.
But it was much more scaled down than the bigger films that were being made at the time.
Yeah.
When you think that, how much did True Lies cost? 100 million.
Yeah.
And Mortal Kombat cost.
But it was originally budgeted at 21, and then they cut it down to 18. But then, due to the test screenings, the audience wanted more fight scenes, so they'd gone in and did additional photography, thus rose the budget up again. But yeah, so for the time, though, as I said earlier, this was cheaper than Street Fighter.
And I think the Batman film that was done,
that was 80 million. Batman Forever was 80 million, I think it was, yeah.
Okay.
That's mental, isn't it? That's a lot of money.
And Judge Dredd must have been in that.
Judge Dredd was in that bracket,
too.
Yeah.
But this was I guess kind of a smaller film, and I remember at the time seeing. I mean, it was distributed in Britain by First Independent.
Yeah.
And again, they were a label who we knew for doing more smaller independent action films.
Well, they distributed things like Highlander 2 and things like that in the UK in the early 90s, and they always used to pop up, didn't they? Part of they always kind of specialised in a lot of action films, and I think maybe quite a few Van Damme ones, but they were just a distributor. They weren't financing these movies, were they?
No, I mean, obviously New Line's the studio, and this was the first production of Threshold Entertainment, and the producer Lawrence Kasanoff, who'd come from Lightstorm Entertainment.
Yeah.
So there's just kind of this youthful energy that's there, and I think you get that in the directorial sense of Paul Anderson as well.
Because he did I think it's a Q&A with him on YouTube where he was a bit out of his depth. We come to shooting these action scenes because
he was in his late 20s.
Yeah. I mean, we're in our 30s now. It's like someone in his late 20s directing a Mortal Kombat movie. It must have been a fantastic opportunity. But also, he's dealing with a lot of things he's not dealt with before, like CGI. He's dealing with, very lengthy choreographed fight scenes. And luckily, he had Robin Shou, who plays Liu Kang, to sort of help him along, because Robin Shou choreographed a lot of the fight scenes. And as we're kind of seeing here with the introduction of Scorpion and Sub-Zero, when you first see them come on screen with that music by George S. Clinton, it really, as you were saying earlier about the tone, its tone is consistent throughout.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very dark looking world, and it's a very slick looking film. And Christopher Lambert is on screen at the moment. We should mention him too, because again, we were saying before the recording that Christophe Lambert, we know him for the Highlander more than anything. But
definitely.
At this point, to teenagers like us, we recognised him from the video shop. You'd see, again, films that were released by First Independent or Entertainment or whoever. And, films like Gunman or
and Fortress.
And they were kind of they may have been released at the cinema, but you thought of them as direct-to-video because you saw them on video.
Because there's so many films I've reviewed on my channel, I'm thinking, I always say I do my research and find out it was released theatrically in the UK, whatever. But you think, I don't ever remember seeing this being advertised, and it just kind of popped. You just saw it on your weekly trip to the rental store. And you think, wow, what's this?
But he was a familiar name from that, and also from Highlander. And Highlander itself was a film that ended up becoming popular later on video as opposed to at the cinema. I've got that correct, haven't I?
Yeah, it did. It didn't do particularly well in the USA. It kind of did its better numbers in Europe, but it was a VHS kind of.
We remember
hit.
it from being the VHS hit.
Yeah.
And I remember just seeing that, even the Highlander 2 poster and the Highlander 3 poster ad nauseum. Just non-stop and but he was still a celebrity that you associated with that genre rather than somebody who was a big name A-lister of the time. So he felt like a big star of these kind of these more independent action movies.
Yeah. Because you'd likened it to
having somebody like Rutger Hauer. You know?
Well, also it's this Marlon Brando moment in Superman where you've got Lambert playing Raiden.
Well, he's the biggest known star in the film.
He is. Well, because you were saying earlier about Street Fighter, and everyone's kind of going, "Oh wow, they've got this person, they've got Clay Minogue, they've got Raul Julia," and this all they've got is Christopher Lambert. It's everyone else is unknown, really. I mean, Bridget Wilson, isn't it? I mean, she was some Last Action Hero. I mean, a small role in that, but I mean,
and you start. The protagonist is Robin Shou, who I believe is this right? He hadn't made an American film.
No, he hadn't. No, he studied in the States and stuff, but he'd mainly kind of learned. He'd been doing a lot of Hong Kong action movies, and he was offered the role, but had no idea about Mortal Kombat because Mortal Kombat was an American product. It hadn't really kind of its popularity hadn't spread over to Asia. Where in Asia, they mostly everyone loved the Street Fighter, they loved the Neo Geo kind of fighting games like King of Fighters or Fatal Fury. But Mortal Kombat really wasn't a big hit in Japan and like Hong Kong and China. So he turned it down. Then he kind of got persuaded to do it. But he'd had years of experience doing martial arts movies, and was a huge benefit to the film. And putting him in he's the lead. People seem to forget about this with Mortal Kombat. There are discussions about having Asians being the star of movies, and you don't see it that often, which is a huge shame. I mean, Jet Li's had his success, and Jackie Chan, but it's always later in their career. They've always done down to because studios want to make money from these martial arts movies. They shoot them in the USA, and they're kind of not as good as the Hong Kong ones. But people often forget that Robin Shou was, an unknown star, really, to the Western market, put in this film, a big video game movie, and speaks very, very good English, and didn't really hit it off. I mean, he did the sequel, did that Beverly Hills Ninja or whatever it was. It was with Chris, that overweight comedian. Can't remember his name now.
Yeah.
He was. I saw some of that years ago, but
Chris Farley.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah. But I mean, he never really found huge success.
Before the film came out,
it's a shame.
A lot of my friends thought they were going to cast based on Dragon, the Bruce Lee story.
Oh, Jason
Scott Lee as Liu Kang. It seemed quite natural.
Yeah, because you'd asked me what I thought about if Jason Scott Lee was cast as Liu Kang. I still think he would have done a good job. I mean, because if you watch Dragon and Bruce Lee's story, he displays many emotions. He trained in martial arts for the film, and then obviously continued doing it in his own personal life afterwards. But Robin Shou had already had this kind of experience beforehand. I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I think they would have both brought. Jason Scott Lee would have brought a lot to the table, but it's hard to imagine now not having Robin Shou as Liu Kang, because he does such a good job with it.
I guess maybe
because there is other ones, there is other actors they'd considered. They say, but I think these kind of theories have been, all these trivial things have been debunked by Paul Anderson, because they thought about Brandon Lee to be in the film either as Johnny
died before production.
Because he done Sat the Crow, but either to be Johnny Cage or Liu Kang. And then also see Jean-Claude Van Damme. Jean-Claude Van Damme was based. Well, Johnny Cage was based on Jean-Claude Van Damme. That was kind of a spoof on him for the original video game. He does the splits and kicks you in the ball, punches you in the balls, and he's a Hollywood star trying to prove himself. And because Mortal Kombat is basically blood sport, but with blood and the gore, with a fantastical element thrown in, and you got the Big Trouble in Little China elements with Raiden. But I think I don't think Jean-Claude Van Damme was asked to do this. Well, especially when Paul was on, I think they've already started casting out. I think the casting's already been. I think some people have already been chosen, possibly.
There was also, I guess, a 2-for-1 element in having Robin Shou as well, because he was the choreographer on this film.
Yeah. It brings over some of the stunt players. Yeah. I mean, what do you think of some of the visual effects we've seen so far, with some of the digital mats and I mean, they haven't gone crazy yet with the CG, which we'll kind of see a little bit later. But at the moment, there's been some good digital work with the matte paintings.
Yeah, I mean, there's such a level of imagination on display that's quite something. And the visual effects supervisor was Alison Savage, who had sort of made her name with Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and also The Shadow, which is the year before this as well. Yeah,
I mean, I think those movies kind of display better visual effects
than
this. I think
they're different. I mean, this is much more ambitious with its CGI.
With its budget, yeah. But I think both those movies had Dracula and The Shadow had higher budgets.
Well, not just the budgets, but also the ambition and the use of computer animation, which still at this point, I mean, they still credit optical effects people at the end of this film. It was still in that transitional period, even though there is CG character animation. We're actually looking at Reptile right now, who's the main CG character in the film.
I was, I remember when I first saw that sequence when you see Reptile with his kind of green skin. I was like, that doesn't look particularly good. But when he goes kind of transparent, it looks okay. But yeah, I suppose it would have been so difficult to sort of create an animatronic kind of reptilian creature.
Do you know what the overall imagination in the film and the overall kind of visual detail, the fact that it looked like a film. I mean, this it's funny. We were saying before how this now has a kind of, I guess, almost a kind of inverted commas dated look. But to us, this kind of still feels cutting edge, because when we were growing up, this is what was cutting edge, and I think it's still very influenced in its photography and production design to films from 10 years before, like Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, and
well, it is there's a lot of inspired visual elements from James Cameron with the sort of use of the blues, isn't there?
Yeah, which was a very, it's very prominent in the 90s in action movies. I also think later on, actually, randomly, when you've got the monks and the temples and all this kind of stuff, I actually wonder if they watched Little Buddha or any of Bertolucci's movies, because it's similar in the way that texture of those elements is photographed.
Well, Bertolucci, was that with the Last Emperor?
Little Buddha.
Little Buddha. Sorry, what did he do?
And Last Emperor.
He did the Last Emperor. Yeah.
I mean, they're similar. You got the big drapes kind of going.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's all very, very regal.
Were you disappointed at all that there was no kind of big fatalities in the film? Were you kind of like expecting? Because back then we weren't given huge spoilers. The only thing you have to go through film magazines like Empire, Total Film, or Starburst in the UK. I don't think, possibly they may have covered Mortal Kombat to some degree, but video game magazines would have articles on the movie. But there wasn't anything like major spoilers, so you didn't know going in, because you knew it was a 15. Think, okay, it must have some kind of gore, but I
was disappointed. But again, the tone won it out. Yeah, it still felt like I was treated with respect as an audience member.
And I think the fight scenes were so well choreographed. It kind of made up for the fact that it didn't have blood and guts in it.
I mean, there's that great sequence later, I believe, with Scorpion, when they're fighting Scorpion.
Yeah,
and Scorpion, because he's a kind of interdimensional creature, isn't he?
Yeah.
So they have some license there to use as much gore as possible, because it's not based on any reality. It's only...
Sure, yeah, when like Johnny Cage cuts him, you see all that the larvae blood come out, don't you?
There's a really, really good retrospective on the making of this film in The Hollywood Reporter, and I think it came out in 2015. It's very, very good, very thorough. But they were saying how they could never kill... Any killing of humans was kind of forbidden, broadly. But if it was otherworldly characters, then you can
do what you want, yeah.
Although we've just seen a guy just get iced and destroyed.
I suppose because he's turned into a visual effect, and there's no kind of he's frozen parts. You don't see blood, do you? So, but that was a great shot though for the visual effect of him getting frozen and like kind of smash cutting onto the floor. It was great.
The characters are quite interesting too in this. I mean,
do you like the chemistry between Cage, Liu Kang, and Sonya? I mean, or it's sort of like you think they're well cast? Do you think?
Yeah, and they're just, it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, we were talking again before the commentary. We were going on about the plot of Mortal Kombat, the film versus the game, and what they do, and it's quite interesting how here, well, from what you've said, they've bunched together the three human characters. Yeah,
because in the game, it's like you choose a character, and they have their own story arc. So if you play as Sub-Zero, you have when you defeat Shang Tsung, you have his kind of ending. I think it's out to, either revenge or to save his clan, whatever. I think I'm kind of speculating that, running off memory. But in the film, yeah, they clump the kind of human characters to be the heroes, and things like Kano and Sub-Zero, Scorpion are kind of just like just villains of the piece who are just there for a particular fight scene. And it's surprisingly, actually, because when you saw Reptile, the Beast, earlier on, because in the game he's a secret character who you'd have to fight via a very kind of difficult process by kind of getting flawless victory. So basically a perfect, don't get hit or block, for like a couple of matches until you get to like the pit level where you can uppercut people into the pit, whatever. And he would face you. And then you fight against Reptile, who was basically Sub-Zero and Scorpion mashed together, and he was just kind of changed to a green colour. But they make him a fully fledged character in the film. I mean, he's obviously there for one fight scene, but it's good they put him in there. It's kind of there for fan service. But this movie takes elements from Mortal Kombat 2. Because when the film came out, Mortal Kombat 3 was already beginning. I think when the film came out, the game had came out for number 3. So this movie was kind of behind with the story, as it were. So fans are already kind of one step ahead. So this kind of combines elements of number 2, where you've got Kitana, you've got who else we got in there? I think that's kind of it. I think maybe just got Kitana in there.
Well, the really clever thing about it, though, I guess, compared to although Street Fighter had to go first as the first of the beat 'em up films. One of the problems with that was they had so many characters and they're having to divide the time between them. And I think it's a very clever move here to stick all of the mortals together, to have these 3 human characters.
Yeah, that's a good decision on the writer's behalf. And also, the game only had 7 selectable characters, where Street Fighter, at that point, when the film came out, Capcom had produced Super Street Fighter 2, which had 16 characters.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare, isn't it, for a writer to include everyone?
But it also meant that with this, you had characters. You got your characters like Reptile and Scorpion and Sub-Zero.
Yeah,
and they can come on just wearing their outfit, and that's enough. That's enough of their
exactly.
characters. No, you don't need to know any backstory or whatever.
No,
they're the opposition to our protagonist.
But if you were a fan of Sub-Zero, would you feel shortchanged by his one, like maybe 2 appearances?
But they're done so well, aren't they?
That's it.
Iconic.
Yeah. They don't have to rely on giving you a story for him. They just say they only give a little bit. Shang Tsung just says, "Oh, they're Sub-Zero and Scorpion are deadliest of enemies, but Slay's under my power." That's the backstory they get, and then you see him kick ass for like 10 minutes.
I was going to say too. I think even though I do like the adult tone of this in the game, I know Mortal Kombat 2. I knew Mortal Kombat 2 more than I knew. I don't think I even played the first game, but certainly the second game.
Didn't you have the Mega Drive?
No, a friend of mine had the SNES, and I'd play his version on the SNES.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and it would have you'd have a completely different tone. I think you had pterodactyls flying in the background at one point.
Yes, on one level. Yeah,
you had these kind of. Maybe I've got this wrong.
Yeah, these trees that have faces in them.
Floating druids and those kind of things.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
And there was a sense of like mad anarchy.
Yeah,
it really
because that one sets in the outer world, the outworld. So this is kind of set. I suppose it's the bridging between the Earth realm and the outworld. It's where they have their tournaments. So, this is like tournament 9 out of 10. They've lost Earthrealm have lost 9 times. So if Goro wins, then Shao Kahn can invade the Earthrealm and take over and destroy it like he's done with the Outworld. So obviously Liu Kang is the chosen one. He's the ancestor of Kung Lao, bloke with Kung Lao's in Mortal Kombat 2, but he's the ancestor of the Great Kung Lao or something like that. So Kung Lao throws his hats and stuff. Yeah, as you say, because number 2, because you were most familiar with that, seeing this is not as
it's not as
crazy.
Wacky. It's not as that had more of an anarchic feel. It was really, you had that guy who appeared at the bottom of the screen saying "toasty" and things like that.
Yeah, it was like really random program.
It was really more like it was like
pushing the comedy, weren't they? A little bit.
Well, but it was also really gory and nasty and. all the people are kind of like mannequins, aren't they? Johnny Cage is much more obnoxious in looking in the game because he's there with his shades on, and he's a guy who's just doing poses. He's not a fully rounded person. But everyone was disposable, and you didn't care if your character got thrown in the pit and got destroyed. They were all like chunks of meat fighting each other. There was a madness to that game. It was more, I guess it was more of a Sam Raimi kind of Evil Dead. It had just this, we say this splatterhouse kind of mad mentality.
Sure.
And here, the filmmakers are getting you to connect more on an emotional level
and take it more seriously. I think really. Well, this one, I suppose it feels more because it is based on Mortal Kombat 1 quite heavily with its storyline, but it's not as anarchic as number 2. It's kind of more. It's taken more kind of seriously. I mean, it is really just Enter the Dragon, isn't it?
So that's what they say, don't they? It's a fantasy version of that.
Yeah.
It's interesting also too on the commentary with the producer Lawrence Kasdanov and Alison Savovich, where they're talking about the film and they're talking about the what they're aspiring to do with it, and they sort of. He said he always envisioned it more of a kind of Jason the Argonauts type story, which I guess it kind of is.
It kind of is. There's massive statues and stuff you see as well.
And things coming alive. And I never thought of that when I was watching it as a kid. It just seemed hyper modern. But I guess every filmmaker wants to go back and make the films that burned into them.
Yeah.
We don't think of. I mean, now we've got things on. We were watching films like Super 8 or the new Star Wars films. And it's all these filmmakers who've grown up with that as the films that they loved at the time, and now they're getting to go back to it, and that I guess for that generation,
I suppose so. Yeah, that's a very good kind of comparison. It's weird though because the commentary for the movie, it was only available on the Laserdisc. It was never ported to the DVD or Blu-ray, which is odd, to say the least. The commentary the producers never mentioned Paul W.S. Anderson. It's maybe there's a kind of a bit of a conflict on set. I don't know, because Paul never came back to the sequel. He wanted to move on. He went and did Event Horizon, and
that's a great film, isn't it?
That was most people kind of say that's his greatest movie he's done. And Paul did return to the video game genre with the Resident Evil series, which I despise. I think they're terrible movies, and it's a shame because when you. Me and my friend Richard, we've reviewed the new movie. We've done commentaries for the old films. We don't like them. We heavily criticise them, and they are, in many cases, badly told stories and directed very clumsily. But it's when you go back and watch Paul's earlier movies, it shows signs of a great visualist, someone who can tell a story, is a competent filmmaker. But then you kind of go through his catalogue of films, and it takes this huge kind of dive. I don't know what's kind of happened to him really, because when you see him in interviews, he's such a lovely guy. He's really. You think I'd love to have a chat with him about movies, get a beer in, have a chat about his career, about some of his films, because but it's a shame when you see him. He's a lovely chap, but the films he makes, unfortunately, haven't been that.
I quite like Alien versus Predator.
Oh, do you now?
And I thought Death Wish 2000?
Death Race.
Death Race 2000.
Charles Brosnan is back.
Oh, I'd love to see Death Wish 2000. Death Race 2000 I thought was very entertaining, with a wonderful turn by Joan Allen.
They did say that was kind of a career turnaround for Paul, because he'd made these kind of Resident Evil films and stuff, and he came back and did that, and that was kind of a bit of a boost for him and the critics.
I think he's a highly accomplished kind of techno action director. I think he's incredibly skilled, and he's kind of built this Resident Evil empire as well with his collaborators on that. I mean, and brought in people like Alexander Witt and Russell Mulcahy.
Yeah. Brought him back really, because Russell Mulcahy kind of had a bit of a downward spiral with his career.
So I think he has an infectious love of cinema that I think is pretty evident in all of his films.
Because no matter what I say, what the critics say about Paul, about the quality of his movies, he still gets them made. He gets them on, and he gets them produced at a very kind of modest budget, and they make a profit. So he is seen as a vital component for the Hollywood system, because especially for Sony, who distribute the Resident Evil movies.
And he
makes them for 35, 50
million.
he's
forever been on the pulse. He's forever been on the pulse of kind of youth popular culture.
Yeah, yeah.
And, we were saying before with shopping too, I mean, the music in this, which we have to get to at some point, inevitably, a lot of those ideas of techno and using kind of an acid house kind of sound, that came very much. I think I'm guessing it came from, it must have come somewhat from Paul Anderson's direction, because even at the end of this film, you hear Orbital's "Halcyon and On" plays, which is a great track. Which
you said he used in Shopping. Is that
it's
right?
used in a scene in Shopping as well too. Also appears in the wonderful opening sequence of Hackers as well. But it's all that kind of very kinetic.
It
music.
seemed to be the way to go to sort of to appeal to that demographic, right, with that music as well. But also it played in with the Sony's advertising of that console was very much using that kind of music and having games for it as well, like things like Wipeout. You've got the kind of dance music as well. It all kind of plays into appealing to that kind of older teenage market. And that's where you before the commentary, Tim goes, Street Fighter soundtrack, the kind of pop album, had MC Hammer, which was he was dated at that point.
Well, that was another thing that felt disappointing about the film as a teen at the time.
Yeah. Because MC Hammer, 91, he did Addams Family, right? And that was a bit of a naff song. And he was already considered a bit of a sellout at that point. And bringing him on to do Street Fighter, it just seemed like another...
It was someone who at the time we associated with several years before.
Yeah.
In 1995, we remembered him from 1991.
Yeah.
Just in terms of what was hip at that time.
Well, this felt contemporary.
It felt absolutely contemporary. And again, I'm just speaking too as a teen.
Of our experience.
And also what it felt like too, being the audience member, the core receiving audience member.
Yeah.
Because as I say, the idea of a beat-em-up video game, when you think about it now, I mean, it seems very childish that we went through that. But at the time, it really means something.
It felt like a big deal. It's a serious thing. It's like nowadays, people are waiting for the next kind of Marvel or DC movie. That's what everyone's kind of waiting, excited to see. But this, it was like, wow, Mortal Kombat's coming out. This is a big deal to us.
And it's your pop culture too. It's what you're growing up with. It's current right there. And it was, as I said, it was devastating to see Street Fighter received and kind of made, in the incarnation that it was at the time. However, that there was an amazing Street Fighter animated movie.
Oh yeah, the manga. Yeah, that was brilliant.
And again, as teens, we looked at that and we referred to that as the real Street Fighter movie.
Yeah, it was
within that context of our lives.
Yeah,
because it seemed closer to the source material.
Oh yeah, I mean that was it. I mean because Street Fighter was, how it was drawn. It was kind of animation, right? It looked cartoony, the video game. So when you saw the animation, it seemed to work well together. Where you're creating a live action version of a video game which kind of looked cartoony into live action, that transition is a bigger leap. It's a bigger leap to faith to sort of kind of to buy into it. Where this, based on a game which had digitized sprites, so you could see that transition more clearly, I think, and it kind of played into its favors, I think.
Can we just mention too about the villain, the main villain,
Shang Tsung,
played brilliantly by Haruyuki Tagawa, who was we knew at the time from the James Bond film License to Kill
and Rising Sun with Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery.
Yeah. And now he's big with the
Man in the High Castle.
Yeah.
He's in. That's an incredible fucking show. Amazing.
But I think he brings a great icy presence to the film, and he does very little.
He really relished. He really gets into the dialogue, doesn't he? I think it just does overact a little bit of it with his delivery, but it's really kind of fun and charming.
I think he's a great contrast to Christopher Lambert's Raiden, yeah, because both of them, one's in white, one's in black. Good, classic kind of good bad thing. Yeah. And both of them too, they know how to use physical space. If you watch all of the scenes with both of them together, they can be stood completely still and just use parts of their faces, and even just whisper at points. And they've completely got your attention. And there's also great moments of great blocking too. I mean, there's a scene earlier with several scenes actually where Christophe Lambert is walking around the other mortals, the three people, and whispering in their ears and giving them little bits of mentory advice, and they're these two polar opposites, aren't they? Raiden and Shang Tsung.
Yeah.
And I think it creates a great visual dynamic on screen.
Oh, definitely. Well, because the Shang Tsung in this movie is a lot younger. Because in the first game, it's a very old man with a big long beard and fired out with his fireballs. And when you played him in the game, you just kind of morph into other characters. So you don't really get to fight him properly in some cases. And if you played the game on Mortal Kombat on a Mega CD, every time he morphed, the game would take forever to load as it was accessing the CD. But in Mortal Kombat 2, Shang Tsung is younger, so I'd presume they're going to go on with that interpretation. There's a chap here who plays Kano. He died a few years back at the age of 40. He died of an accidental kind of overdose, which is a huge shame because he was such a great. Because he's a British actor, but he often put on an Australian accent. And he was in the Stephen Sommers movie Deep Rising.
Right.
Schlockfest. Amazing Schlockfest from the 90s.
I want to make another point just about...
Special move here.
Sonya.
Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Just wanted to make him about Sonya, and I kind of mentioned about Cammy as well too.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I think that's quite obvious, and it's sort of an elephant in the room, and you have to mention it, is that there are very few female characters in these games. And at the time, it was seen very much as a... It felt at the time that it was...
very much male-dominated kind of genre, and...
which is, unfortunate now, but that nobody thought of that at the time. Although there's Katana, and who was the other one?
There's Katana, Jade, Melina. They came in obviously the sequels, but in the first game it was just Sonya. Like Street Fighter, you just had Chun-Li. So Cammy came along in the later updates.
But my point is, they were great characters. They were really good characters, and I was elated. Everyone I knew was elated when we saw Cammy and we saw Sonya.
Sonya. Sorry.
When we Chun, when we saw them in the films, the fact that they were representing what was in the game.
Yeah.
We were over the moon about that. So to us kids, if they had female characters in the game, we wanted them in the film.
This is a great moment here, where he does he shoots into the tree. When he looks, we just seen a bit. When he looks around, there's apparently a car that goes past, but sort of disappeared. But now he does his kind of shadow kick, his special move. That's quite cool, and it comes with the best moment in the film. Well, one of the best fights. I think, as Paul Anderson had kind of said, that this sequence here and the moment with Reptile are his favourite moments, and it's probably the best choreographed sequences. And a guy who's chap who plays Johnny Cage, I don't think really had a huge extensive background in martial arts at all. I think he may have possibly trained for the movie, but he really sells the part and gets into it. I mean, there's many moments obviously where there's going to be a stunt double, but there's a lot of kind of master shots with the actor.
This is a fantastic fight sequence, isn't it?
It's really good. I mean, did you say, because this is Fear Factory?
Yes, it is. Yeah,
and it's quite heavily edited, isn't it? They just kind of kept the guitar riff in, haven't they?
Look at that. It's absolutely amazing set, isn't it?
It's a great master shot.
From what I've read, most of I think all of the soundstage stuff, all of the studio work was filmed inside the Santa Monica airport.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus.
In hangars there, yeah.
Bloody hell. Well, I think using a hangar would definitely make the best use of this space. Jesus. Because I remember bits of this when they showed Games Master TV show.
Yeah.
They had a segment on the movie, and because I think by that point Street Fighter the movie had already had its kind of bad press, and I think Dominic Diamond's already kind of making fun of the movie. But I think what was going around was that Mortal Kombat was going to correct the mistakes of the last two kind of video game adaptations, and it did. I mean, despite the rating for this movie on IMDb is quite low. I mean, it's like a 5.8, which basically means it's an average movie. But people that follow my channel and some of my older reviews, I've got like Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert kind of clips thrown in to show a sort of comparison to what critics thought of a movie at the time, sort of give people a reflection of, not because some movies which you love now and you grew up on as a kid, adults thought were kind of, stupid or rubbish at the time, and it's just like because you've grown up with them, you see it in a different light, like I do with many other films. We've all kind of gone through that experience. But Gene Siskel, who is always a bit of a toughie to please when it comes to these kind of movies, he really enjoyed the film and he gave it a thumbs up, which is very surprising because I can imagine back on the BBC with the film 1995 with Barry Norman, who'd probably be like, "This is rubbish," But yeah, so it's a big surprise that was when I saw that. There's a great little Jaws moment, isn't it, with the camera move
where they're dollying forward and zooming back.
Yeah.
I remember reading, I think it was, when was it? It must have been it was in one of these genre magazines that came out in the late 90s. It must have been Starburst or Starlog, or I can't remember which one it was. It was actually for the second film.
Oh,
but
right.
The second film was directed by John Leonetti, who was the cinematographer on this film.
That's right, yeah.
Who's a very good cinematographer who'd also shot Jim Carrey in The Mask year before.
Yeah.
And Hot Shots Part 2.
Did he do Weird Science and 48 Hours, possibly?
That was his brother.
Oh, okay.
Matthew Leonetti.
That was Matthew, yeah.
Who actually shot Mortal Kombat
2. Yeah.
But I read an interview with him, and he was saying how I think they were saying I might be misremembering the quote exactly, but it was about having very wide angle lenses close to the actors during a fight sequence and getting a sort of dynamic that they must have learned from this film, because Paul Anderson has said in interviews that initially they tried to do a lot of the fight sequences kind of all in one as master shots.
Yeah.
And it would there'd be moments where punches wouldn't connect or whatever, so he'd make them redo it and do it, and eventually got to the point where Robin Shue had to inform him, Paul, this is there's coverage that you can use here. And I'm wondering if because the look is very unique for that time. It's all kind of handheld on these very wide lenses, and it's very graceful, and it gives this great gliding motion to it. It's very beautiful to look at. It's very unlike what you have now. I mean, Saving Private Ryan and Paul Greengrass's films, I think, have just completely changed the way people look at fight sequences now in film. For me, for my taste and sensibility, I still think of fights being kinetic and, there's got
to be rhythm to it.
Yeah. And also the use of slow-mo as well, which is really came in, I guess, probably most memorably with Sam Peckinpah and films like the Wild Bunch, but also James Cameron would use it a lot too, and at that point that was kind of norm. That was the norm for action films at that time. I miss that now. We don't see I think we may be seeing a return to it, but certainly after Saving Private Ryan, when you had films like Gladiator as well, and
But do you think the action scenes, your kind of how they've evolved in terms of like the Hollywood system, how things are kind of the contemporary way, is how it's edited? You're saying, because if you look at say, the Bourne films with Greengrass, there's a lot of edits within a fight scene.
But it's a lot of stuff that's done on handheld cameras with kind of half shutters and things, and shot on longer lenses, so it gives it this kind of immediate kind of shakiness. And people mentioned about it when the Batman Begins came out, that the geography wasn't clear too on things. And
that's the problem with actually Resident Evil, the most recent one. It's the most appalling editing I've seen. But
just in the photography of it too, just the camera movement and I'm still very much attached to the way that stuff kind of used to be done, and
because Paul was inspired by Hong Kong cinema with this. Why aren't we seeing that in the Hollywood films?
But I think the techniques of that aren't completely apparent.
Well, those techniques I think really came on with The Matrix, which were really kind of pushed. Also, the extensive wire work within a fight scene, but it is here. I mean, you've got these great kind of, well executed choreographed scenes that are in long takes. There's not like an edit before a punch. You're seeing it all happen, and in the moment when he kind of fights Sub-Zero, which is amazing cue-off. It's like versus mode, isn't it? Where you can fight each other. But he does this great... Sub-Zero does this kind of flip onto his back, and he flips over and kicks him in the face. It's an amazing move. But so you're seeing all the hits in these long master shots.
There's a lot of... I mean, it's a cut every, second, every 2 seconds. It's still... it's still
keeping the energy up.
It's not like in a Jackie Chan film where you will see something unbroken going on for tens of seconds, where you're seeing multiple things going on.
Sure. But I think the chap who is Sub-Zero is a French martial artist, I think he is. But I'm not sure, because I think in Mortal Kombat 2, because Sub-Zero doesn't have his mask on, he's got the kind of look he has in Mortal Kombat 3. I think maybe one of the actors who was in this as a stunt double plays a role. I can't really remember, but I'm sure he had a role on this movie.
The editor of this film, Martin Hunter...
That name rings a bell.
...was the editor on Full Metal Jacket.
Bloody hell. Gone from Stanley Kubrick movie to Mortal Kombat. Well, a few years apart. But that's good, though.
It's two great films.
Yeah. There's a Stanley Kubrick connection there. Here we go. That's not bad CG work, I think. I mean, I think that's probably done by Buena Vista.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But it's imaginative, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was certainly state-of-the-art at the time.
It was state of the art at the time. I mean, there was. I do remember though. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to things like Reptile, I was a bit like, that looks a bit hokey. I mean, but I suppose we're only going on from what we'd seen in terms of computer generated imagery was Terminator 2, The Abyss, and Jurassic Park. But Jurassic Park, it's funny in a way because people compare Jurassic Park's effects to modern effects, and they go, well, Jurassic Park looks a lot better. But if you actually total the amount of CGI in Jurassic Park, it's like under 10 minutes of footage, and they had probably a year to work on that 10 minutes of footage, where
this is much more ambitious, creating a fantasy world.
Yeah, it's doing something totally different. What do you think of the Goro effect? Because we've seen him pop up earlier. We haven't mentioned him.
I'll be honest. I love animatronics.
Yeah,
I love in-camera effects, etc. Same like many people do.
Yeah,
I have to admit, I was never convinced by this animatronic because it never looked like a human, and my expectation was that Goro was a human with several limbs.
Yeah, and
I oddly. I always assumed, before I knew how it was done, that it was stop motion.
I thought that as well. I was a bit baffled when I saw behind the scenes photos, maybe a couple of years later, and you've got this guy with this massive, upper torso on his shoulders. So the guy in a suit, I'm not sure, maybe it's Tom Woodruff or Alec Gillis, operating, or in the bottom part of the suit, and they're operating the other part with an animatronic. And I think, do you think, because you perceived it as stop motion, was it because of the mouth movements? Because you just said they had syncing issues, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, in the commentary they say that there was issues with the software that was used. I mean, I think, if I'm correct, there was a piece of software called Gilderfluke. I might be completely misremembering this, so Google it and have a look.
Sure.
But there was a piece of technology called Gilderfluke, and it could synchronize sort of lips of these animatronic creations to backing tracks, and it had been used for the Brain Gremlin on Gremlins 2, and also for the Bishop animatronic in Alien 3.
Well, that worked.
Which was also by ADI, yeah.
They both worked pretty well then.
They're fantastic. But for this, I guess, for the size of it, for the scale, for the ambition, whatever, they just couldn't keep it up.
Work.
The other thing too, which I'm not sure about, is in those films, in Gremlins 2 and in Alien 3, they may have had clean single shots, without the actors of the puppet. So then you can also employ camera tricks. You can undercrank the camera, so you can make things look speedier.
Yeah, because in Gremlins 2, he does talk pretty quickly.
Yeah, but I can't remember if there are any two shots where you're seeing a human character in the same. Whereas in this, the humans are there in the same shot, so you can't really, unless you make them slow down. The humans slow down. It's
maybe the distance or the frequency, how to get to make the lips move, because shots from earlier, he's sitting on his massive throne, and there's a table like a lot further away where the camera was.
Wasn't it cable controlled though as well?
Oh, that's a good point.
I mean,
because it wasn't. What was the software they kind of used on Turtles? Because there was a different software for number 3, which kind of run on Windows 3.1 or something.
I don't know the intricacies of that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the artistry. I love the work ADI does. I think it's great. But for me, just from what I've seen of the game, I'd always thought that character was a human.
Yeah.
And this looked like it was more of a beast. And I guess in Mortal Kombat Annihilation, they have a similar character, don't they, with multiple limbs?
They do, yeah.
And that was quite convincing.
That was more convincing, I think, really, because it's just a female actress. And she's an actress, sorry, but it has the 4 arms, and it doesn't look that bad. I mean, they've got was it Kintaro or Montaro? I think it's Montaro. Okay. Who was in the second one, the one with the kind of the horse legs, whatever. I mean, that wasn't too bad with its visuals, but I know what you mean. Though I was a little bit like unsure with Goro, because also you can see the kind of the latex of the suit, can't you? It doesn't look like skin.
Yeah. It doesn't look human.
Yeah, I think it's definitely down to being a bit too ambitious, but I appreciate what they did though.
Yeah, it's beautiful artistry.
I mean, They did say this kind of film was a little bit, obviously, clunky with its dialogue and its kind of and the performances. They do feel a bit stagey with their kind of. There isn't it feels a little bit unnatural with their kind of delivery. It all seems a little bit staged. Doesn't seem to flow that particularly well. Because I don't think there isn't much story to this film. I mean, it's a very kind of simple premise about the tournament.
Very simple.
Yeah.
Please, can you explain the plot of Mortal Kombat?
Mortal Kombat. Okay. Well, I did say earlier about the tournament. You got this. It's the ninth. Now the final tournament. Now obviously if they lose, the Outworld will take over Earthrealm.
But this is the 10th. This is the 10th of 10 tournaments, isn't it?
Yeah. So they lost the last 9. And so Liu Kang is kind of the chosen one. He's the ancestor of the great Kung Lao, and Raiden obviously kind of knows that, but Raiden doesn't have his powers in the Outworld. He's the god of the Earthrealm, I presume. But that is basically its premise, and these characters are kind of thrown into it and take part into it. They don't really. It seems like Sonya and Johnny Cage, they're still kind of perfunctory characters. They're really they have their own goal within the movie, but it's not to win the tournament for them personally. It's for them to take out one key component for Liu Kang to get to where he needs to get to, which is to face Shang Tsung and to avenge, the loss of his brother. But they all have to. Raiden's there really to inform them that they need to make their own decisions and not rely on what they've been told to do by someone else. They've got to choose within their own, make a decision within themselves to take part in whoever they want to fight or how it's going to end. So, as you see, I mean, what Raiden's doing, he's not telling them all the time. He's just giving them clues.
Yeah, well, in the commentary actually with Kasnov and Savage, they do mention. I think I remember this correctly. They do talk about the theme of the film and how it's about how you have to make decisions for yourself and not rely on the gods.
Yeah.
I really like this piece of music that's playing right now. This is the on the beach scene. I will say this though. I remember at the time. I do remember this. This is coming back to me. This is coming back to me from 20, whatever it is, 20.
Acid flashback.
21, 22 years ago. I remember being at the cinema and seeing this sequence with Liu Kang on the beach where he's having this recollection. And one of my friends, John, leaned into me, and he said, "This is VR Troopers. Why are we watching VR Troopers?" Because they had a similar sequence. They had a it had a similar character who had who was maybe his father had been killed or something. But it was it all seemed sort of similarly on the map. I think this sequence here, by the way, is beautiful.
Or how it's shot.
No, just the executed as well, and the music playing too. This is with Johnny Cage and Sonya standing on the side of the beach, and you can see that his affection for her is coming out.
But the performance though is a little bit clunky here.
But it has heart, and it's true. And I guess as a teenager too, when I was watching it, it's sort of it's that point in your life, isn't it, too, where learning about yourself, and I really like. I think it's a really beautiful.
It's beautifully shot. Yeah, it's got amazing DP. We didn't discuss the.
It feels like an adolescent romance. That's what's so good about it.
We're watching Hollyoaks here. But if you go back to the theme tune from the beginning, it opens the film, right? Because I said to Tim before we did the commentary, because we were a bit baffled about whether was the song done for the film, was it done beforehand? I'd only associated the Mortal Kombat theme, that Mortal Kombat, with the film, and then whenever he's kind of, I think of Mortal Kombat and music in its relation is through the theme tune. So I thought, okay, it was just done for the movie because it's the first time I heard it when I saw it in the cinema. But Tim said, oh, no, it was done beforehand by Techno Syndrome, wasn't it? Or they did a remix of it.
So from what I gather...
We were a bit baffled.
No, we both sort of took this for granted, didn't we? We both sort of have sat here and gone, because I remember the song coming out long before the film.
Yeah,
I remember that being synonymous.
I had no clue of it
with the video game, and when we actually did some research, it turns out that the song came out in either 92 or 93.
Yeah,
and the version that we know now is the Techno Syndrome version, which is also on the album too. To make matters more confusing, there's the remix by the Utah Saints that everyone knows too, which is also on the album as well.
Yes, on the end credits.
Yeah,
that's it, yeah.
But this Techno Syndrome version came out on the Mortal Kombat album in 1994, a year before the film came out.
Yeah.
So we're really confused.
Where's the original version? What's the original version they'd done a remix of? Because we couldn't find that.
I was going to say too, the score by George S. Clinton, not George Clinton from Parliament, but George S. Clinton, the film composer. At this point, George Clinton, I don't think, had done any big films, big sort of studio movies that you'd know off the top of your head. This was a sort of a new thing for him, and he ended up doing the Austin Power films, which I think were also New Line as well.
Yeah,
and they're brilliant scores. They're brilliant. Sort of pastiche John Barry
definitely
scores.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. I think he's an excellent composer. But from what I've gathered, from what I've read about the film Mortal Kombat, they had used a temp score initially.
Oh, really?
I think this is in the Hollywood Reporter article.
What did they temp it with then?
They temped it with some just traditional classical orchestral music. And the audience just weren't responding because it's, they, again, like me watching the film, they associate techno music with the product. And so there were also Paul Anderson having that ear for the kind of, that techno music that's used in the film.
Yeah.
In shopping, kind of coming through as well, too. They ended up creating this hybrid sound, which kind of took a lot of kind of Asian ethnic instruments and mixed them with techno. So it kind of gave. So you'd have this sort of almost like the more traditional film soundtrack nuances to give emotion and help character moments and such. But you'd also have that driving beat as well going underneath it, or that kind of rhythm.
That kind of the driving beats also fits well with the action scenes as well.
Yeah, but that's for his actual score. And then for the for the sound for all the other songs that are in it, you've got this curious mix of, we call it techno, but I guess some of it was kind of English electronic dance music. So you've got Orbital in there, and I think there's a Josh Winks remix of something at some point which I can't remember. But there's also a lot of industrial music too. You've got you've got Fear Factory and the song Joint Jezebel that's in it as well, and Gravity Kills.
Is it KMFDM or something like that?
Yeah. So but you also got this sort of, can I call it new metal? It's like there's a new metal sound in there too.
You suppose you can, yeah.
Hard. It's like this hard kind of grungy rock.
Because when we saw Street Fighter the animated movie, that had new metal thrown in, like Korn at the end, Alice in Chains and things like that. I think Alice in Chains was part of the sort of Nirvana kind of.
So there's thing. A Napalm Death's in this at one point too. So it's this really weird mix that just kind of works. And it's a great album. We love it, don't we?
I fucking love that album. Yeah, because it's weird because it took me a while to actually track down when I was a teenager the George S. Clinton score, It was because most, because it had a lot of kind of licensed music. That was the one that did really well in the charts, and so actually the George S. Clinton one did sell pretty well. But I was so happy to find it, finally get the score. But it's because when you hear the music, you instantly think that's Mortal Kombat, and none of his material was released for Annihilation. I think it's really just down to because the film bombed. I think it did make a profit, but I just think it was just kind of slammed by critics.
We haven't we haven't really talked about Johnny Cage at all, have we?
Only a little bit. But yeah, because Johnny Cage, I mean, he was. Now he's done his duties now as a character. He's defeated Goro, so I mean, he's going to go through to the Outworld with Liu Kang, but doesn't really do much because he buggers off in a minute because Liu Kang they know they're being followed by Reptile, so he throws Reptile into this weird statue and it turns him into a human form. But Johnny Cage kind of just disappears. He wanders off, and then Katana turns up, and then he's there again. So either there's a scene deleted with Johnny Cage, or they're just kind of like, well, he was not important for this scene. He's not going to be written in.
That weird kind of Big Trouble in Little China vibe as well to it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because Big Trouble in China has that moments where you've got reality above ground, and underground you've got this kind of fantastical element, which is kind of a bit like the Outworld. When Kurt Russell goes underground and he's got a weird bug thing comes out. So yeah, you could
and Raiden
you could
looks
throw
like
them
he's
in.
come straight out of it. But you also got these kind of buddy fighters too.
Yeah. That's what they're trying to do.
Who both have separate partners who they then have to go after. I mean, it's kind of it's a similar thing.
Yeah.
Maybe indirectly. I don't think there was anything. Who knows?
Yeah. That's a good comparison, mate. Yeah.
And now we're into this is the Outworld, isn't it?
Oh yes.
Is that Outworld?
Outworld, yeah.
Yeah, and
it's going out.
And this looks like it was shot in Thailand. Where they shot a lot of the location work.
Yeah, because you can see the wall there on the left was obviously old architecture.
And they shot a lot longer in Thailand. Again, Street Fighter was shot. Location stuff was shot in Thailand.
Yeah, but they didn't make use of any of these excellent locations. They'd.
Well, it was very different, I guess. Too.
It was different, yeah, but they could have had. I know, but it's like when you see like the level of Sagat in the game, you think, well, that backdrop is kind of classic Thailand, and this kind of makes use of some of that. But they've done a great job of kind of lighting the set as well, because when they bump into Katana, and they're walking down the pathway, and she's kind of giving her usual spill of expository mumbo jumbo. They've got loads of flashes of lightning, and you can see right in the distance there's still flashes going on. I think that is just great attention to detail by the DP.
There must have been huge areas to light up as well.
Oh, I know.
Absolutely massive, and those huge wide shots. I know you're not convinced by Reptile. Well, you said that you weren't at the time.
Yeah, even now, I'm not totally. I'm not a huge fan of the animation. It's very. I mean, granted, it's probably the best thing they could have done at the time with achieving that effect, because Reptile was never displayed. It didn't have a look like a reptilian look in the video game until number 2, where he took his mask off. You saw his reptilian face. Bit like the film Virus or TV show. Is it V? Sorry.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the fight scene makes up for his kind of CGI appearance.
Great fight sequence.
This is incredible. Yeah, and then
the music. The music is amazing. It's actually a track by Tracy Lords.
Really?
Yeah, who went on to become the at the beginning of Blade, the vampire who leads poor guy into the club. Yeah. And she'd moved into dance music at this point in the 90s, and the track's produced by Junior Reactor as well.
My God.
Who went on the Matrix sequels, the second film with the
Reloaded
car chase and the
that whole track there's incredible.
I mean, they're amazing electronic dance. Group. But if you can go onto YouTube and seek out the music video for Control, because what you hear in the film is an instrumental version, but the actual track with Tracy Lord's vocals is great fun, and the video is a James Bond inspired music video, and it has a cameo by John Waters in it.
Oh my
of
God.
all people, and it's wonderful. It's got all these amazing homages in it. You've got Man with the Golden Gun's third nipple. You've got Tracy Lords dressed in gold paint. I mean, it's wonderful. This fight sequence is fantastic, though. It is absolutely mesmerising.
It is. I think it's probably the stellar piece of the movie. I think really because of seeing Robin Shou kind of he choreographed this. I mean, and broke a few ribs in the process. And they also throw in like a special move from Mortal Kombat 2, which does a kind of bicycle kick.
Yeah. One thing we noticed earlier, at the beginning when Liu Kang wakes up and he's haunted by the death of his brother.
Mm.
When you wake up when he wakes up in the bedroom, if you notice in the corner of the room, there's a bike that's been put on its side.
Yeah.
And I pointed it out to Oliver before, and he just said, "Oh no." But I'm thinking they put that there to foreshadow the bicycle kick later on. Yeah,
good one. That's really good. Yeah.
No, I'm sure it's.
Look at the background. There's loads of little symbols behind him on the right there.
Right.
There's like gold symbols. They're part of for Mortal Kombat 3 when you got the versus mode when you choose your character and it goes down 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 when you got like Sub-Zero versus Liu Kang whatever, and you press the buttons on the like the punch or kick so you could change the symbols, and whatever symbol you get like the pattern you'd either reduce your player's health or reduce their health or whatever, give yourself an advantage.
Oh, right.
And during the end credits, you see other symbols as well. So I think that plays into giving people like hidden clues as to what you could do for number 3.
I was going to say the wire work in this.
It's really good.
When Paul Anderson mentions in interviews about the wire work and how proud he is and how it was the first of those kind of big American films moving towards Matrix and Crouching Tiger that would use wire work. At the time, I didn't even think about wires, that they were on wires. It was so kinetic. I guess because I was so, the image of Raul Julia hoisted up on those, on that static rig with these light up trainers, that sort of burned into me so much.
Yeah, because we hadn't seen really like choreographed kind of fight scenes with wires in the US films, kind of the traditional moves. I mean, because we've all seen like things like Hulk or Superman where people are flying, but it's not to the great extent having huge battles. And they're always kind of, because I said to Tim, I said, you see Reptile kind of spin through the wall. So how does he do that with the wires on? Didn't you say to kind of tilt the camera?
Well, I'm just thinking, just in terms of
how you would shoot it or something. Yeah.
Well, how it would normally be done is if somebody's spinning through a wall, then you put the wall so it's horizontal.
Yeah.
And then you lower them down, and they're doing the exact same thing. Why would you?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
why would you make that much hassle for yourself?
I know. I thought that's the most difficult way.
But that's why they're these people are great special effects technicians.
This is a moment which is a funny way. It's got that mid-90s CG. The camera kind of spins around the. It was actually something you haven't seen before actually in a film where the camera's spinning around a 3D object. And it zooms in onto Sonya. It's very nightmare TV show here. It's so flat.
I remember when I think it's SFX magazine, the British sci-fi magazine.
Oh yeah.
I remember a quote again, another quote. I was impressed by the CGI when this film came out. I remember reading a quote saying something like, "You can tell what's CGI or not with your eyes closed."
That's a bit harsh.
Yeah, but people look back at this stuff now and they think, "Oh, it was the '90s." People didn't, "Oh, it was good then," and they didn't. People were really critical.
Yeah. It shows you not this nostalgia can't always not always a good thing. It always often tricks you. But
I think
that's the thing. What a lot of people kind of find baffling is when when you see old reviews of movies where, especially with Gene Siskel, Roger Ebert, or Barry Norman, you think they said the film was absolutely terrible, the effects were bad, and you're like, wait a minute, I remember that being amazing as a kid, but you're a kid, so.
I mean, we were coming towards adult at this point.
Well, yeah, we were 13 years old.
I think we were just swept away by all the imagination and the energy and the kinetic spirit that was on screen.
Oh, sure.
I will say it's a little disappointing at this point that Sonya's been sort of reduced to wearing this outfit and sort of sexually objectified.
Well, yeah, it seems like they've got like loads of hairspray and hair mousse in the out world, haven't they?
But I will say, I think it's nice that later on, Johnny Cage makes a comment about the outfit.
And she's like,
and she's pleased, you know.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that helps to, you know, it's making the best of the worst situation.
Yeah, definitely.
But you know, as they've been set up as these three equals, who've gone over to the realm as a team, sorry.
Yeah.
You know, you like to think of these characters as being equals. Although at the end of the film, on the closing symbol, you see all three of them standing with.
Well, all of them are standing there, with in katana. So yeah, they're all, as you say, they're all kind of equal in their strengths at the end. Because it's not just it's not all just about Liu Kang.
And I think Katana is a really good, strong character too. Who
she's played to be, obviously a strong woman. She's a princess. She has the rightful heir to the throne. But she's not. Basically, she's just not evil. She's a good guy. She's there to help Liu Kang, and obviously in love with him. And there was a joke earlier on with Johnny Cage is like, she's 10,000 years old. Liu Kang's like, so what? Oh, stuff this. Just takes his clothes off. We're not having sex, Liu Kang.
But she's a very clever, character who's playing a game.
She's definitely playing a game. She sticks to the rules, right? She knows the rules, back to front, and she's clearly aware of what Shang Tsung's up to, and she's doing her best to sort of keep the Earth realm how it is.
She's
supposed to. I suppose she's supposed to unite them, isn't she?
She's deceptively manipulative as well.
Yeah.
I think Talisa Soto does a really good.
Well,
job with the character.
She's okay with it. I mean, she's with the sequel. I mean, she's a little bit like with her performance. There isn't much charisma there. She's just kind of she looks. She's an attractive woman who just kind of recites these kind of dumps of exposition, and I don't think she convincingly sells what she's saying, but she's just the best with the material, which is quite frankly just dumps of exposition, which isn't just kind of. Being a character where you're just telling people the rules can't be that exciting to perform. This is a great kind of moment here. Look at that. It shows you, the chap playing Shang Tsung. I can't remember his name now. I do apologise. Shows he's done his training as well. It shows that he can, do these kind of fight scenes and show that he's quite confident at doing it.
I was going to say also, am I right in saying that you said there's 7 characters in Mortal Kombat?
Yeah. You can choose from.
How many female characters are there?
One.
So what?
And because obviously you're saying, you were when you saw like Cammy being cast, Kylie Minogue going, oh wow, excellent, seeing her on the screen, etc. Sonya was not a popular character. She's not in Mortal Kombat 2. She gets basically thrown into the background of a level. The least popular characters, Kano and Sonya, were basically thrown into the background of Mortal Kombat 2, like just a level. So that's basically like a cameo for them. Sonya is brought back for Mortal Kombat 3. So
I seem to remember there were more female characters in.
In number 2, there's more female characters because you get Melina and Katana.
Yeah.
But they and was it? No, I'm thinking of Sheva or Shiva. She's
so
number 3.
So when did Jade come in?
Jade was a secret character, but then she got put into Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3.
So there were more.
There were more coming along. Basically, they what Midway always did, or the developers of Mortal Kombat, when it came to introducing more characters, they were quite lazy. Where, for example, they wanted another character like Sub-Zero or Scorpion, they'd use the same sprite and just have a different colour. It would be red, and he'd be called Ermac, or purple, and he'd be called Rain. It was proper lazy. They create a backstory for the character, obviously, for the fans to sort of get into the character and change their special moves, but it was basically just a palette swap. Which I wasn't a huge fan of. Sonya was an original character, but which I think she's kind of based on Cynthia. Is it Cynthia Rockhart? That sort of
Cynthia Rothrock, really?
Yeah, Rothrock. Yeah, so yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But there are more female characters in Mortal Kombat than there are in Street Fighter, in the games.
In the games, well, over time, more female characters have been thrown in.
Yeah.
But I think general consensus was that Mortal Kombat had more female characters. Kind of earlier on, I think, really, come to sequels. I mean, Street Fighter 2 only had out of all the updates of Street Fighter 2, you only had 2.
Right.
You had Cammy and Chun-Li, and then you had more.
Look at this beautiful set. It's so good, isn't it?
It's great, isn't it? I love the sort of the beams of light. It's a bit like a Joel Schumacher Batman movie.
Well, Jonathan Carlson was the production designer on this, and again, like George Clinton, I don't think he'd done a big.
Oh, he hadn't.
A big studio film at this point, and he went on to do other films for Threshold. I think he designed. He definitely designed Beowulf, which we haven't discussed.
Oh yeah, you were telling me about that earlier.
Beowulf,
the
Christopher Lambert film directed by Graham Baker, which came out about 4 years after this, and it's got Christopher Lambert in the lead role. But it's based on the poem, but again, it's a sort of. I remember them saying it was a techno feudal kind of piece, and I think that's what they used to market this. They're referring to this.
Well, yeah, the trailer is very much like, this feels like it's Mortal Kombat,
but it's techno feudal. It's like mixing sort of an older time with techno, and you got the music and all the kind of grammar of Mortal Kombat is in Beowulf, and the design of that is also Jonathan Carlson, and it's very beautiful. He didn't design Mortal Kombat Annihilation.
Oh, he didn't.
But I think the design in this is beautiful. I think
there's some great set pieces, great sets of design. With the kind of the throne room we saw where everyone has the banquet, and then you've got the kind of the finale here. But even kind of like the pathway, you've got all the statues and stuff. It's all beautifully detailed and very imaginative. Where when you look at Street Fighter, it had a very plain look to it. It looked very TV movie, also small budget. But
it looked like the ideas of the Street Fighter movie it felt like it exceeded its budget in terms of they couldn't properly realise what they wanted to do. Yeah, that's how it came across as a teenager watching it. Whereas with this, it's done so creatively.
How would you compare it to Mario Brothers in terms of creativity, in terms of the look?
It's different. I mean, Mario Brothers is
different,
intentionally going out of its way to try and subvert the game as much as possible. Whereas with this, it's trying to be much truer to it.
Yeah, and that's why it succeeds.
Well, it was the first time, wasn't it? Really? I mean, I've not seen Double Dragon. You've seen Double Dragon?
Fucking awful. One of the worst films I've ever seen. My friend rented it as a kid. We thought, okay, I've not seen Double Dragon. The cover looked interesting. To what it could be, and within like half an hour, I'd fell asleep. It was that bad. It was
The main character is basically Liu Kang in this. He's the guy who holds it all together with his personal story of grief and revenge.
Yeah, he has the biggest kind of story arc really to go on.
So he's really the eyes we see everything through. Even though there are the three of them, even though it is a team, he's also explicitly told he's basically the chosen one as well.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be the chosen one, does he? But he has to kind of realise how important he is, and not selfishly just do it selfishly decide not to do it because of his own problems with the stories he was told as a kid about the Outer Worlds, and he realises it's all true, and he becomes to realise the importance of his journey and who he is. It's a classic tale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but it gives it a heart to it that the game
doesn't give you, no.
Because it's a game.
Yeah. You're just saying, I want to be this guy. He looks like Bruce Lee. Let's go. Let's put my 50p in.
But I really like that this film does have a heart to it, but it also is a gratuitous tournament. Fight 'em up.
It's so.
Beat 'em up.
I'm sure I've discussed many times before, possibly in other commentaries with a similar kind of theme, but it is difficult to kind of reinvent or recycle the same tournament structure all the time. Bloodsport did it successfully. It basically doing what Enter the Dragon did, and there's another tournament movie which kind of Kickboxer has it, but it's not really. It's all leading up to one big battle. But then you've got, I think, other tournament movies that we've had. I mean, you've got things like Karate Kid, but it's all kind of leading up to the final battle, isn't it?
Sure.
With this has loads of fights within it, and Van Damme tried to, do the tournament theme again with The Quest, which he directed,
right?
Which kind of bombed, and it's a bit of a bore fest.
Is that the one with Roger Moore in it?
Yes, the one Roger Moore hated. Right. I want to get his biography so I can just read that segment on The Quest.
I was going to say, Liu Kang does a fireball at this point, so he kind of breaks the breaks the fourth wall of reality in some way. And this is a fantastical supernatural thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but he's on a human world. He's doing, something that is well, you would think one of the gods would do.
Yeah.
So.
So is he being empowered at this point? I always wondered too, based on the thing of the theme of not looking to the gods and taking your own destiny and all that.
Sure.
Here's a question: could Raiden have been in the film fighting?
Well, in the game he fights, doesn't he? But in the film, it makes it perfectly clear that we can't interfere with their destinies, right? So he can't like interact in the fight because there's moments where he's in the crowd, isn't he, watching the Goro fight, so he can be in that realm, but he can't take part in it, I suppose. But in the sequel, he takes part in the fight because the Outworld has now invaded the Earth realm, right?
James Remar, isn't it?
Yeah, weirdest casting ever. But he can then fight like properly because he then becomes human. Oh, it's very stupid. If Raiden could fight in this, if we saw a fight scene with him, I mean, would it add anything extra to it? Would it end up just extending the film artificially?
Well, I was just thinking, just in terms of the theme of it, and because he's a mentor in this.
I think it's best
the Brando head, in Superman, or he's that kind of thing. And I was just to really reinforce that theme. If maybe even if one of them had saved him at one point.
Yeah, that would have been quite interesting, actually. I mean, I suppose if you'd gone into this and Raiden was your favourite character, you would feel a bit shortchanged, wouldn't you?
But just also in the storytelling, because I just think it's a strong idea that's not totally pushed forward. Even though I love the film, this moment here too with the children all running around the temple, this just looks so Bertolucci.
Yeah.
The imagery is, the way it's shot, it's beautiful.
But I do like how the movie ends when you've got Shao Kahn turning up and it's voiced by Frank Welker, the voice of many cartoons and Transformers and stuff. And he's basically doing who's the villain in Inspector Gadget?
Dr. Claw.
Dr. Claw, it's the exact same voice,
I love the little bits of humour too that Christopher Lambert
throws into it, yeah, it's great.
Really nice.
Well, he always just laughs because he's just completely like, oh, sorry, I do apologise for saying, you're the world's going to be destroyed if you don't save everyone.
So this guy's name is?
Shao Kahn.
There we go. That's how long ago it is since I played this game. This is a great closer. The way that the screen locks together, and it's sort of similar in Event Horizon as well. At the ending of that,
that kind of closes, doors close, don't they?
Become a trademark of Paul Anderson.
But I remember seeing that, thinking, "Oh man, it's going to be like Mortal Kombat 2," and it did come out, and it was absolute rubbish. But the sequel kind of takes part literally. Well, it opens with literally continue on from this sequence, and 95% of the actors have been replaced.
And the tone's changed as well.
Oh, yeah, it's completely over the top and bonkers and campy and this... I don't know what happened on that.
No, I think...
Lyndon Ashby, that was it. So he played Johnny Cage. I forgot his name earlier.
Yeah, no, he's
a good guy.
It's a great cast.
Yeah, it's really... Yeah, I mean, Bridget Wilson, they said, Cameron Diaz was going to be playing Sonya, and she'd either bowed out or hurt herself, couldn't take part in the movie. I don't know if that would have made the movie more successful. I don't know, because she'd just been in the mask, hadn't she? So possibly maybe gained them more money.
I must say, it's coming back to me again, just sitting there in the credits after the film and thinking, it wasn't a big splatter gore fest like the game is. It didn't have that kind of anarchic irrelevance that the game had, but it was a tone thing, it was, and it's important, I think, when you're when you're at that age, when you're kind of in your sort of young adolescence, you're watching something that you feel that adults would watch, even though 10 years later you look at it and you think this is juvenile.
Yeah,
it really it did it with a straight face.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
and for that it should be absolutely applauded. And it was the first video game movie, in my opinion, to do that.
As you're saying about it's adult movie. I mean, when I watched it in the cinema, I was 2 years under the age, but I felt like I was watching an adult movie. It felt like
Well, you had to get it. You had to sneak in.
Yeah, it felt
you
like
actually had to sneak in to watch it.
It felt like I was being a kid again and putting on something like RoboCop when you're not allowed to watch it.
Yeah,
kind of scenario.
And that's what Mortal Kombat was. I mean, remember when the games came out, and I remember my friends' mothers saying, "Oh, that game, has it got violence? Is this the one on TV that they're talking about with all the violence?" And oh no, it's not this one. And you're doing it, and you're playing it, and it felt like you were doing something illegal. Like it was a big thing. It was a really big thing. Now it just seems probably seems kitchen camp.
Oh, of course,
to anyone born after 2000 or whatever. But it was
it was like it's all like things parents are scared of it. People in politics were like, oh my, these games are bad for children. It's always saying like things like Doom got lumped into it. The crappy Mega CD game Night Trap. That was games that were kind of thrown under the bus without any real observation, and just kind of based it on someone said this game is inappropriate. But like the whole, video nasties of the 80s, where,
games were going through a phase of that.
Yeah, similar situation.
And it all kind of happened again with Resident Evil, which Paul Anderson went to direct.
Okay, so other video game movies you've seen, Tim, do you think this is probably the most successful one, do you think, in terms of adapting?
I haven't seen enough to give a qualified answer. I
think for me, because I've seen quite a few. I mean, I've only seen a couple of the Uwe Boll ones, like Alone in the Dark and House of Dead, whatever. They're appalling movies. I think the other one that does successfully capture the look of the video game, or one it's based on, is Silent Hill, which does look absolutely stunning. It's not a particularly good movie. I don't think it's that entertaining, but I think it's a great looking movie, and it does kind of capture the game so well, which Resident Evil films never did. They've done 6 of them, and you never watch one of the movies and go, wow, that is Resident Evil. Instead of just going, hey, here's a character from the game. This is the game. It's not like, oh, we've got Barry in from Resident Evil. This is a faithful adaptation, without just turning up without no real reason.
It's funny when weird stuff happens, though, isn't it? Like I remember when Street Fighter the movie came out, they had Street Fighter the movie the game. Yeah, it's like, well, it's based on a game. And then with Resident Evil, when that came out, I was watching, I was playing it, and I'm thinking, this is just taken all the most cliched elements of existing Romero films and zombie films, and it's just put them in a hodgepodge. It's so broken down, it's barely a framework to tell the story for a game, and it's all about the gameplay with the game. But then when I heard somebody say we're going to make a film of this, I thought, how can you make a film out of something that is it's like a really stripped down pastiche of cinema elements.
I suppose the game has borrowed a lot from horror cinema, right, and kind of put it through the blender, made its own thing out of it, right? But you can see what it's borrowing from or homaging, right? But if you make a film of that, which is kind of copied loads of other things, how's the movie going to be original?
So it's a movie version of a copy of a movie.
Well, yeah. Because when you had Street Fighter the movie, the game, you've got a game based on a movie that's based on a game. So it's done this weird 360, isn't it?
And part of the reason that Resident Evil worked, it had really deliberately bad acting in the video game. It was it was slightly wooden. There's a wooden feeling to it. So I don't know. But then look how many Resident Evil films they've had.
Well, they made money.
They've all been incredibly successful. So they,
there's an audience for it somewhere.
Paul Anderson had a vision that nobody else had. So.
Well, yeah, and he appealed. I think he just kind of appealed to a niche, really. And if that niche can generate you 200 million profit for a film, then you're in business, and so I mean, it was fortunately with Mortal Kombat, he went on to one sequel and kind of fizzled out.
There was a TV show.
There was a TV show, Conquest,
and a cartoon show. Animated show.
Well, there was an animated kind of prequel called The Journey Begins, which came with there's a Laserdisc of it, and I think it was on the UK DVD as well as an extra, where it had kind of CGI, really bad CGI, poor animation as well. Kind of a prologue to this movie, and had the making of with it as well, like a short featurette as part of it. But I think by that point, Mortal Kombat was really kind of fizzling out to popularity. it was people had moved on from fighting games, and obviously they still had their kind of followings, like Street Fighter did with Street Fighter Alpha series, and you had the King of Fighter games are still going on a yearly basis, but the video game market had shifted, and it wasn't about fighting games anymore, and I don't think the market was there anymore for Mortal Kombat. I think Mortal Kombat has obviously had its comeback a few years back. They kind of restarted it again. I think it was called Mortal Kombat 9, but it's called, or maybe Mortal Kombat 9. It was really out of the series, but it was kind of a remake of this one, starting again, which I think is a great game. But in terms of, Mortal Kombat always had more story than Street Fighter. I felt. I think maybe over time,
the movie,
the video game, had more story than Street Fighter.
Just having it set partly in a fantasy world as well.
Yeah, it gives you kind of more things to explore, and so it can lend itself to a movie more than, say, Street Fighter, which had kind of always kind of weird. I mean, the Street Fighter the animated movie had more of a story there to it, but I always felt Street Fighter had more of a backstory as the games progressed and they kind of expanded the characters. But at kind of face value, you look at both Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter 2. Mortal Kombat had more of a story, even though it's kind of very cliched and just borrowed a lot from things like the past of like Enter the Dragon, but had this kind of fantastical element to it. It's kind of made it a little bit more appealing, I suppose. But for what it's worth, I mean, it's the third video game adaptation, and it's still really, in my eyes, the one that's still the most satisfying. Had a great soundtrack, good production design, good photography, good performances.
Absolutely.
Generally, for the most part. Obviously, the effects are obviously dated.
And it captured right that moment.
Yeah, it landed
it felt
right
on the pulse of the people who were actually playing it, which is the most important thing, I think, with something like this. And perhaps that applies to all genre, or anything that's taking its cue from source material.
Yeah.
You have to be true to the audience who are buying it.
Yeah.
And the zeitgeist.
And hit at the right time. So we saw recently with Warcraft. Warcraft has been popular for a long time, but the movie came out way too late and didn't hit right, I don't think. So this hit came out at the right time, got its market, did well at the box office, and led Paul on to do, have a successful career, and showed that, this young British guy come out of doing this kind of cheap movie called Shopping, which was panned in the UK, had some success in the USA, and he's gone on to have a good career, despite making a lot of bad movies.
Now one of the top genre filmmakers.
Yeah. It's at the end there. It's got New Line Cinema. It had the voices talking. That was voices from Mortal Kombat 3, maybe, I think it was, or 2. Yeah.
Right.
Little nuggets there for the fans. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the commentary with me and Tim. I will be back next week with some more podcasts and reviews. Okay, everyone, take care and goodbye.
Bye.